Okay, we'll call this hearing to order. I'll begin by reading the notice of public hearing. The notice is hereby given that the following hearing will be held at the Butler County Courthouse, so 5 Avenue. Outside. South. Rondo. This is. So we'll begin. Yes. Yes. Copy the. What? I don't have your copy.
Yeah.
Got two, that would be.
There you go. I don't have to.
One thing I forgot. You can get you a cup.
So first off, I'd like to make sure that you guys understand what we're talking about, lay of the land. Are you familiar with that area?
We got very familiar.
I'm gonna be real brief about the things that I put in the appeal. Some things have changed since we filed the appeal. Part of the reason that I spent the $750 for the appeal is so that that we can have a discussion. I was told very early on that if I spoke to you about this in the first place, you wouldn't even talk to me about it. So I have no way to have any discussion with anybody who's making any decisions.
Well, you do have a way. This is the way. These are.
Right, that's why I spent the $750.
It's like going. Can't speak.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't necessarily agree. Which is,
There's a lot of things in.
so let's try not to drag this out any longer. Let's say there's been some things that have happened. This is mainly a placeholder so that I have an opportunity to potentially voice my concerns. Since that time, I've met with Boyd and Jeff Tross, the manager at H-K. We've agreed on some things, and we're working on finalizing that agreement and trying to work through some sort of a amicable solution.
Which one of the articles does that relate to?
But yeah, specifically. So
Just to keep it straight.
So, but I'm just, that's an overall 30,000 foot view. We'll talk about it. I'm gonna start with number 2 right now. So the reason that I put this in here is that they didn't really establish a need for a proposed change. They come in and say, we need more gravel, okay? There's no evidence of that, other than that they said we need more gravel. There should be, in this process, some objective method of showing that they need more gravel. There needs to be an inventory in the county showing how much gravel there is in the county, or how much they have, or how much, there needs to be some method of doing that. Otherwise, somebody can walk in here at any given time and ask for another gravel pit, and they'll get it. And that's basically the experience that we've had. If you know, in the record, we were the only 2 people that appeared at this hearing. You know why? Because everybody we spoke to said there's no point in going because nothing's going to change. There's going to be a gravel pit there. Nothing you can do about it. Okay, so that's the perception of the public. You go to these zoning hearings, the applicant or the business gets what they're asking for. In my mind, there needs to be some more objective way for them to say that there needs to be more gravel. I can't walk in here and say, this is going to affect the value of my property, because it's automatically, that comment or that notion is automatically thrown out because it's not objective. Would you agree or disagree on that? Okay. So, but that's the reality of it. Number 3. Again, this is objective. This needs to be objective. what's the benefit to the community, the neighborhood? You know, you can say we need more gravel. You say, yeah, we're growing, we need to make more concrete or make more roads, but again, it should be more objective in my mind. Go back to the 96 findings of fact, Mr. Christensen, you were there, you were part of the people that wrote that. There was a reason that was zoned the way it was. We bought that property in 1998, and we were kind of young and naive. Our realtor assured us that, hey, this is farm ground, there's nothing going to happen back there. And obviously, like I said, we were very naive. I didn't realize that in 96, this finding fact had already been, they'd already platted all that ground for light industrial and for, I mean, it was all in existence. We didn't know that. We bought this property, field back there. Within a year, there was a gravel pit, which obviously caused us some concern, but we were also assured that it would never move on across. According to findings of fact, I mean, that's what people were thinking. I don't know what you guys were thinking. I tried to research it. I was at a meeting where they said that would never happen. It would never go expand, and obviously it has. It is. Again, as I mentioned in my opening statement, things have changed in terms of how I'm looking at this, and so I'm utilizing this as an opportunity to ask for the county's effort to do a better job at this process. Number 7, assess the impact on traffic loads and access to the public roads. Assess access to public roads, assess quality of county roads, assess width right of way, relationships to long draining road design networks. I think that really needs to be looked at more closely. The overall plan that's being looked at for 65th South shows that that's going to be up to 7 lanes wide. And with the metal power poles there, it only makes sense that it's going to have to move to the south. I don't think they're going to spend the money to move those power poles both so that they can span both ways. I think that needs to be considered at some point. Number 9, again, this is where we met with H-K, and we're working on a resolution here. The noise levels are there, and I've experienced with my testimony. It was watering in the middle of the night, check the noise levels. I don't know if they were at that particular time they were operating 24 hours, which is part of my concern is this, this is going to be operating, I mean, potentially 24 hours at a time. Again, I understand their side of it. We talked about it. I understand that. I understand the need for it. But I think that I still have some concerns there. And I don't know that they answered it. I guess I can leave it at that. The buffers, I think are necessary. I think they need to be adequately constructed, and even more so, adequately maintained. I challenge H-K to do a better job of taking care of these, keep them clean, keep them weed free, keeping the trees alive. Not much point in having one. Trees die and they get filled full of weeds. They're more of a problem than they're benefit. Right? Again, I'm talking to them about the berms around the property. They've agreed that they're gonna do something, and they asked me to help them in designing something that would be acceptable, which I think is commendable on their part. One of the most frustrating things that happened during the hearing was, in addition, hearing fees were used as the criteria to grant use change application request, or it's just the other application until they applied, received an answer on the M1 reason. Familiar with that part of this whole thing. The applicant was unwilling to withdraw their application. The board entertained the notion of tabling the use. And when that was mentioned, one of the commissioners said to one of the other commissioners, I don't want to table it because I don't want to have to hear you. I don't have to sit here. That's not what they're there for. They're there to make a fair and equitable decision about this whole thing. I think that needs to be addressed. My final concern was that the motion was never clear. The applicant didn't know what the motion was. We didn't know what the motion was. It was not drafted. It was never put up there to be read. It was reread, I believe, by the staff. I mean, we looked at the notes and figured it out. Again, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus here. I'm just saying that we could do better. This could be a better process, and it could be more transparent. And I think it needs to be. I think that's all that I have about the met a couple of times. I sent him an email. I'm going to provide. You're okay with me providing that copy? This is what I've asked. This is what we talked about. They asked me to put it down. They're going to review it with their staff and attorney. Yeah. They're going to review it with their staff and their attorney, and hopefully we're going to end up with a reasonable resolution. So that's part of our job. So, just for your education, we talked to them. Maybe you need to stop it. So this is my property line right here. Property. This is the Burns pit. H-K, this is the existing pit, M1. This is what we're talking about today. We discussed about them putting a berm. There's no need to put a berm between two gravel pits. We agreed on that. So these are all individual properties. They discussed putting a berm here at my property, potentially going all the way around my property, but in our discussions, I'm not going to ask them to do that all the way around right now. Because at some point, they're gonna end up putting a berm across here anyway, because this is City of Idaho Falls, this is H-K. If and when and if you read the record, they want to continue to farm this, which is one of the things that caused me to kind of change my mind, is that they're trying to utilize their property, keep it from being developed into houses and whatever. Well, I got both sides of my mouth, but in discussing with them, they're trying to utilize it responsibly. They're trying to make it so that their impact on us is mitigated. And I appreciate that, and I think they should be able to try. So again, we're talking about putting a berm down along between the properties here to protect these folks. Eventually they'll put a berm here, protect this direction, this direction. One of the things that I talked about in the email was protecting the folks that are across in this area, because that's the direction of the wind. Everybody, and we know the wind comes out of the southwest most of the time. We're going to get something. That was the most folks want. In there any question about the berm and what we've talked about and what's in there? Again, I'm not necessarily asking them to go clear down here right now. They agreed to do it. They said they would do it. Here to here for now. This in the future, if they don't do this right away, and if the noise, if the nuisance is too much. I mean, they've agreed to do it, and I'm saying, well, maybe we don't need to do it right now, but I would like the potential to ask them to do it if the nuisance is not acceptable. Talking about the trees, we have this is some working document. We talked about the trees, the size of the trees. I didn't really specify positioning in there, but they have a drawing that talks about positioning. Vegetation. We just want something that they can maintain. We don't want vegetation that's going to be difficult for them to maintain or impossible. And we want it to continue to look nice. They're going to try to irrigate it with the existing pit, and that's okay with me if they can irrigate it. If they can't maintain it. If they can't keep it wet so it'll grow, they're going to have to put in some sort of an irrigation system. One of the other concerns that I had and others have expressed was the alarms on their equipment that was working, the backup alarms, and they've assured me that there are other options other than the beep, beep, beep. They've got a different type of alarm that's acceptable to the people that regulate them, and they're going to look into doing that. Hours of operation, I'd like to operate from 8 to 5, but Mr. Trosper isn't too excited about that. I'd like to see 7 to 7. I know that the guidelines, which are kind of loosely followed in terms of gravel pits, are 8 to 7 in Mondo County, or 8 to 7 and 8 to 12 on Saturday with operation on Sunday. At a bare minimum, that's what I'd like to see. I know that Mr. Trosper explained to me that when, and Boyd Stewart was explaining to me that when they have contracts that are let by the state, have very tight windows of completion, they have to operate 24 hours and create enough gravel to meet their obligation. So at those points, they can come in to the county and get a 24-hour operation permit. And yes, again, if the mitigation is there, if the berm's helping, to keep the dust down and noise down, I don't see keeping them and using the property. the last thing I put on there, we didn't talk about this, but you had assured me it wouldn't ever become sanitary landfill. It says, I don't want to see it become sanitary landfill. Talk about using it for, what do you call it? Yeah, as long as the firm maintained, it doesn't.
I'd like to thank the Jensens, we're inviting people into the dialogue. Oh, excuse me, my name is Boyd Stewart. And I'd like to thank Jensen for opening the dialogue with us and being a spokesperson for shortage. He face some headway as far as what we need to do to be better neighbors. Is we have made some progress as far as berm design. There's a couple of things to take into consideration. Our goal in the beginning is to build the berm, get grass established on it for the first year, and then put trees on it. We'll start on that. One of my concerns, or one of our main concerns, is being able to farm as much of that property as we can. Just because that's the most feasible way to control the weeds and to control the business. City investments, made some investments with the GPS system. Big irrigation cutter. On range. Obviously, the operating hours are always a concern as a contractor. State checks. Generally speaking, the county's 7 to 8 works for us. From our point of view, we'd rather have to open and work towards the 7 to 8 rather than have to come here. Limited use or conditional use, I'm not sure how it works. Temporary use to cover the duration. Pretty much together with what
You look at my property line and go straight north, the end of my property. Everything to the north of my property.
we actually own 3015 west. This portion has been advanced in the city, so lines. Foster. This portion. Yes. Probably is from the road, but that piece is. So we'll be farming city property.
Sorry, could you speak up with them there?
Oh, do you wish to testify?
No, not particularly where,
We live on
like
83rd.
Mr. Jensen says, where the guilty party that's coming late to the game. We own 10 acres that runs adjacent to the property, both to the east and to the south.
You mentioned it. We're concerned about, like he said, exactly what you said, the burns. But it would appear that the property that we built up next to is not owned by H-K. Ours is owned by Burns, we're here.
Yeah.
But and if you look at those burns there, they're an absolute mess.
Yeah, I did. Awesome. Okay,
And our concern is about the irrigation. We want to continue with our irrigation.
So that our, quotes, so that our irrigation rights are not impeded upon.
So one other maybe point of clarification is there's lateral ditches that run between my property and these folks' property. They run the length of my property all the way to Yellowstone Highway, most of the way to Yellowstone Highway. I don't know where they. That's the water that they're talking about. They don't want that. I don't know that there would ever be a problem with that. Because that's, I guess it is on your property, it's on my property. I get to pay property tax on two conditions.
okay. So we'll, do you want to wrap up with?
Written down.
Speaking for the record,
Oh, sorry, Peter and Christine Gladstone. The address is 1988 West, Adelaide South.
Anything in conclusion?
do I, is this where I talk about what Boyd said, or do that in general?
Opportunity to talk about.
Yes, the one, I wrote down some notes here, but the one thing that I would agree with them on is that ours, it doesn't make any sense. Again, I'm looking at it from a taxpayer perspective. It makes absolutely no sense that they have to come back in and ask for that permit. What they should, the process should be, that they should send in their application. They should send in their contract showing this is the duration, this is the amount of gravel we have to. They need, again, they show an objective method of use for this time period that they should be granted. I would object to that. I think they should be required to notify me so that I don't wake up in the middle of the night here running and go, what's going on? I think that's only fair. But I wouldn't oppose that because I think that's rational. I think that's good planning. That's good business. Would you agree? I didn't ask you about that.
Okay.
I think that's all for me.
start, I've got a couple of questions. Okay. Looks like the center pivot's kind of right on that property line, right?
It's, no, it's out into the, it's,
It's into your property.
yes.
So,
In fact, if you could pull the, not the colored picture. The zoning picture.
guess I see you lined it up, Mr. James.
So, this is a center. And at some point, when, as we move across the center.
That was a big part of the discussion during planning. It's difficult to operate the pivot with burn there in the middle. I guess that's the purpose for waiting until you get over it, because they're so far away.
And this one, we can do that right away, but our hope is to do this one. Anyway, get the grass established on it, and then if we find across the trees established on it, so we can establish the grass, take it in place, and then establish trees. And then as we get, eventually, as this becomes not farmable or whatever, we'll have to also be run down the site, so they can see. That never happened.
So you'll continue. It's going to take you to mine out the rest of that until you reach this.
So
No, just to the edge.
Just here?
Paramount.
well, another thing is M1, the M1 zone, that is.
Oh, you're not going to continue across. You're going to start.
Which we probably shouldn't talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to start right in this.
The existing pit.
I hear you correctly.
This one was opened in 1997, 26 years.
It was opened after 97. I was there in 98. It was not open.
One of our was 97. It's in the, maybe it's year 2000, it's been about 23 years to use that much. There's that much reserve here. There's as much reserve here as was there, depending on the growth of the area, again, just say 15.
The question's been asked to the county throughout the years, basically, how do you propose, or how do you establish a need for ground in these pits? The county has never really, up to this point, taken any initiative to say what was. That's not really something that you consider. part of the problem when you start establishing and saying, okay, countywide, we need to look at, establish a need for if there's more gravel in Longview County. If you have a really big operator with hundreds of acres of pits that are active, and you say, okay, tell us your reserves for gravel, and they say, well, we've got enough gravel to operate the county for the next 40 years at the rate they're running in the city of Idaho Falls. Then you create a monopoly in that instance that you're taking any of the small runners who may not be able to keep up with that, the opportunity to have them operate a pit of their own. So there's never really been a good way at this point to establish what that need is. That's not to say it's not something we could look into in the future, but it hasn't been.
And how do you decide whether the gravel from that pit?
We're done. We're gonna ask.
The way it works right now.
Yeah. We need to.
Study around gravel pits, kind of similar there in the county. We haven't really established a pattern. Properties by gravel pits just. Study to show that unless you had an appraisal right before gravel pit. Gravel pits. Some solid facts to mirror head.
This.
Point about that study, it's a peer reviewed study. I think that there's some validity to it. But it's the same type of land, it's rural. I mean, I think that it would, I mean, if you haven't read it, if you didn't see it, I would encourage you to read it.
I did. Yeah, they can take that.
Yeah, I think we've got some similar processes that established for some updates. saying how to put police. We probably wouldn't, I mean, the buffer needs to go there is the pit needs to. Well, you got the property. When they find it.
I just want to speak for a minute. I'm probably guilty by where I'm sitting that you think that I'm associated with HK, but my name's Ryan Loftus. My office is at 743 South Capitol.
If you're not with H-K, it's closed for additional testimony. You've been doing up here.
I have, but I signed up and I'd like the chance to speak if you want. If not, I'll just be quiet.
I would like, but we've already closed that.
Apparently I missed that part that when you said we're now closed for public comment.
Yeah, we got public comments.
But that was unclear for me too. I thought there was another comment.
But then there was before questions.
After you asked your question, then I thought there was gonna be another comment.
Well, just to make sure I wasn't unclear, everybody take your last shot. Anything you want to add?
I'll just take my shot at the need for gravel in this area.
Said the last.
Yes. We're a capitalist economy here, and Austin said, well, it's very difficult to regulate what the need is, but I'll tell you what happened in Teton County, Wyoming, which is our neighbor to the east. They regulated it and they ended up with a monopoly, one company that controls all the gravel in the entire county. At least in the Jackson Hole area, I should say. We don't want that to happen here, and the gravel and sand are basic building materials. We all want paved roads so that we don't have dust up to our eyeballs in the summertime and mud up to our eyeballs in the winter. We want our roads paved. We want our concrete foundations for our home. We want to use cinder block. We want to use all the products that come from these raw materials. And so there is a need, especially based on the growth of the county that we're seeing. And as Boyd said, this pit has approximately 10 or maybe 15 years. Depending if the growth continues, I think that it'll be on the 15-year side, not the year side. The past pit that's been there for 20 years is bigger ones.
They had wanted to comment, but they already closed it when they realized it was not comments.
Go ahead. Just out of fairness.
I'm afraid we are, like Mr. Jensen said, we figured when you granted application to extend the pits both to our east and both to the south, there was very little we could do about it other than request some sort of adequate burn or coverage. But if you run along the highway and you just completed, that burn is in a state of disrepair. It's full of weeds. When the wind blows, the dust blows off it. So
When we drove here today, coming by the part that's done by H&K, I know the other part isn't, And the wind, I know it's a windy day, but the wind, the motor couldn't see a hand in front of it.
So again, with
Like
Mr.
that
Jensen's,
gentleman just said, even though there's a need for it, I think it's an NIMBY, not in my backyard, right?
Which I appreciate. That you have, the time.
Yeah. thank you for the honesty.
Guess the last, I mean, I'd like to sit down with the commissioners.
28 days after the issue.
Okay, but I'd like to sit down and have a further conversation about all of this. I agree that there's a need for gravel. I'm sure there is. But there ought to be an objective measure. There ought to be some, instead of just anybody walking up and saying, hey, I want to put gravel through here. Because it's been my experience that if there's a gravel pit that's going in, it gets rubber stamped by the zoning commission. That's the perception, and that's what, when I asked the staff, you're shaking your head, Mr. Walker. I asked the staff, when was the last time they saw one that was denied, and they said that they're not denied very often,
I told you that we denied one this a year ago.
but not very often.
But I told you they're not denied very often if they're in an area where there's already an existing gravel. But when they try to open a new area,
You're getting outside the scope. Because this is a discussion.
I just have my final thing to say is, you have written assurance, Mr. Jensen, that it's never going to be a sanitary pit.
That's part of what we're working on.
It's part of the guidelines, correct?
I didn't hear that.
Part of the zoning doesn't allow them to do.
What does that mean?
Could someone define construction demolition, what that was?
basically use construction material, concrete, things like that, not anything that's household.
What about wood?
What is in there, yeah.
And those are.
There's going to be another hatch pit eventually.
And that's just point of clarification, John Hagan. So in the INM1 zoning district, have the landfill by right. In the agricultural zone, additional hearing, use hearing is required to allow the EAG landfill. Needs to come back for hearing for the plan.
Okay, now, close the hearing. Can be as clear as I can. Issues. Yes.
Would it be reasonable that they send the applicant and us an email?
This case.
Well, I think it'd be reasonable to send it to people. Everyone wants to care. So, respectively disagree. Email is a well accepted method of business communication. And legal, it's legal. It's just a notification to say that, hey, that it's out. It's not saying what it is. It's out.
I know, but who was saying?
We'll call in, we'll make sure they understand that we need to know when this is, what this is.
Okay,